Hey, so Digital Circus is pretty neat. It's a show where a bunch of randos are transported into a digital circus. Why are they there? No idea. What do? They cope. They cope and cope and cope until they can't cope anymore. The show is fundamentally about making the best of a bad situation, and I think it's the second episode of the series that establishes that theme best. I used to not like the episode because they spent a lot more time on Gummigoo than Cosmo's funeral, and I still think that more focus on Cosmo's funeral would have drove the lesson home even harder, but I've taken a kinder view of that episode recently. Let me explain. I'd say episode 1 establishes the bad situation, which is being in the circus. Episode 2 shows Pomni sunk into a depression over the fact that she can't leave, and that takes up a lot of her energy. So much so that she can't really be bothered to socialize. That is until she and Gummigoo get trapped under the map and they have a little conversation about feeling like nothing. The episode began with a dream about her being needlessly abandoned by everyone, so I'm inclined to believe that this has probably happened to her before, or at the very least she's had thoughts like this before. However, after he dies and she attends Cosmo's funeral, she learns that the circus goers wouldn't just abandon her like she's nothing, because despite everything, they're all in this together. Well, all but one of them. Jax this entire time has been a rude and dismissive asshole. He claims that this is because he wants to be the funny one, but that's a complete fucking lie. See, everyone in the circus is coping in their own ways. Zubul would rather sit and sulk than do anything she doesn't want to. Gangle is kind of the same, but she's shy, so she usually just quietly goes along with the adventure. Kinger doesn't cope so much as he just exists. Ragatha tries to keep a positive outlook on things, and Jax would rather bitterly swipe at literally everyone under the guise of it being funny. And this, among other reasons, is why I believe that Jax is the worst. And contrary to other asshole characters in fiction, he works really well for the setting of Digital Circus. Okay, so calling someone the worst doesn't really have much merit to it if your only piece of evidence is that they hurt people a bunch. So let's express. I like to delve into the why whenever I run into someone like Jax. I did this a while back with Vriska Circuit, someone who I keep drawing more and more parallels to Jax, actually. The why of Vriska was a lot of abuse, and the why of Jax is being in the circus, and also having lost 2 of his closest friends, along with some possible abandonment issues. We'll talk about that later. It's implied that he lost Ribbit and Cosmo due to his own assholery, and this is where my sympathy begins to die a little bit. He effectively needled someone, possibly 2 someones, into a psychotic break, and then just kept acting like a dick, arguably even harder. I'm willing to bet that Jax has dealt with abandonment before, which is why he's pretending he doesn't care so much. It's entirely possible for someone who's deathly afraid of being left alone to push everybody away first. We talked about this a little bit ago. When so many people hurt you by leaving you alone, you start acting heinous so you don't have to bear the pain of being abandoned. And what's interesting about Jax is that he knows. He's completely aware of the fact that all he does is push people away out of fear, that they'll get close and then leave or die or otherwise disappear. And he's also aware of the fact that he acts like a piece of shit in order to do that. And his response to all that is to loudly and proudly shout that nothing is real and he doesn't care and there's no use in doing anything that isn't funny because it's all fake.
You know none of this is real, right? All we are now is a bunch of cartoon characters. So what's the point of pretending we're not? I see how far I can push things. I screw with people and I break the 4th wall. You wanna know why? It's 'cause it's funny. I do everything 'cause it's funny. 'Cause I'm the funny one.
That's another big fucking lie. Jax cares a whole fucking lot about things. Pomni calls him out on this explicitly.
I don't show up to any funerals.
Yeah, I bet you don't. Because you're scared. You're scared you'll actually show a human emotion.
This is made abundantly clear by his, not friendship, but interest in Pomni. She's the only one who hasn't said she hates him, so there's a new potential friend in her. However, Jax's own fucked up ideas about people leaving him prevents him from getting any closer to her. That and the fact that Pomni just cares more than he'd like her to. You know that one low-stakes friendship you had in middle school where all you would do was joke around with them and maybe be a bit of a dick? Don't moralize to me, I know you were always 10% racist when you were 14. Well, that's the kind of friendship Jax wants with Pomni. One where neither person will get too attached and therefore care that much if they go. But that's not really how any friendship works. You might ask why he even tried to begin with, and I'd tell you that's because no one can fully rip out their heart like that. Everyone yearns for connection, even if they think it will only ever hurt them in the long run. So their lapse in judgment has a brief lapse in existence. This is what leads Jax to say all the heinous shit he does to Pomni. He keeps pretending he doesn't care, saying that they were never friends, all for the sake of driving her away so he doesn't have to bear the pain of losing her when he's more attached. And then he goes full fucking Light Yagami on her.
I do not care about you or anyone else in this circus in the slightest. End of story. You are my playthings, and I get joy out of making you suffer. I'm the one who causes pain for fun. If I led you on, it was just to make this part hurt you more.
And I wouldn't say that this is entirely a lie. I wouldn't say he particularly enjoys causing people pain, it just makes him feel less terrible to physically harm people. It's like the difference between actually being happy and taking a painkiller, or actually being happy and resorting to alcoholism. This is also a way for Jax to deal with the powerlessness he feels by being in the circus. In his mind, at the very least, he can control his relationships with other people. This leads him to overreach by harming others, because like with all abusers, on some level they do it to feel powerful. He tries and fails to excuse all of this under that lol, it's just a game argument, but that idea flies out the window when you remember that their minds may be in a digital world, but their pain receptors feel literally fucking everything. But it's not like he's attacking NPCs, he's going after other people trapped in the circus. Specifically Gangle, because Gangle is too weak to stand up for herself. All of this is why Jax is just one of the worst kinds of people. I have very little sympathy for somebody who is aware of the fact that everything they do and say is wrong and evil, and yet makes no attempt to change that behavior. I don't really care if you've lost a lot of people if your response was to light other people on fire about it. I don't care if you have a tendency to self-sabotage if you keep choosing to do it despite knowing it's a bullshit lie. If you keep swatting away every outstretched hand, I can't feel all too bad for you. And despite him being so terrible, I think he's a really good fit for the kind of story Digital Circus is. Like I said before, the whole story is about coping with a bad situation, which is the circus. More specifically, it's about how different people cope with bad situations. Every character in Digital Circus feels like somebody who you would meet in real life. Hell, I've straight up been friends with a Gangle a couple of times. They're all real, and they're all coping in their own way. And I can totally see a real person acting the way that Jax does. You know, Digital Circus is a very interesting kind of story because it's a story where things happen to people. A good or bad ending isn't defined from the get-go because it feels less fictional than fiction. And when you make a story like that, you've basically got the entire human experience to work with, including the bad, terrible, ugly bits. Jax is a character for whom healing is impossible because he himself makes it impossible. So long as he chooses to remain this way, he will never regain the kind of connection he once had. And in that way, he's an incredibly realistic character. The only other example I have on hand of similar stories wherein things happen to people are Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Everything in both shows is hypothetically possible, and both main characters are both defined and hindered by their unrelenting self-importance. You could meet a Walter White, and you could meet a Saul Goodman. You could meet people for whom stopping their terrible behavior is just too much for them to handle. And Jax doesn't really like either of those two, but similarly, you could meet someone for whom changing it all is impossible because they themselves make it impossible. I think it's really cool that Gooseworx has managed to make a show like this and have it be really, really good. I would assume writing a story like this would be hard, considering the fact that both you and the audience really have to think about the work. It's also, at times, unsatisfying because life is unsatisfying. You're basically at the mercy of whatever the asshole on screen decides to do. But there's definitely an audience for these kinds of stories. And part of the reason there is such an audience is because the works that I've listed all have writers who care a lot about the characters. And Gooseworx does care a lot about everyone in the circus. I feel like the setting itself confirms just how much she cares. I keep saying it with Jax, but really it's true for everyone in the circus. When they arrived, they are faced with a question. No one asks them directly, but they still have to face it. And that question is, you are in an environment of virtually no consequences. What will you do? And when that question gets asked, you really get to explore a character. You get to twist off the lid to their head and show everyone its contents. Some people will choose to do nothing. Some people might try and remain as moral as ever. Some will see this and then torment everyone. And that's why over the course of the script, I found Jax to be an incredibly interesting character. Before, I thought he was just light Yagami if you watch too much Looney Tunes, but now I know that that was a lie. And it's a lie he tells everyone, including himself. In reality, he's just a very clear depiction of one of the worst kinds of people. Someone for whom it's painfully obvious that he lies about never caring. Someone who keeps pushing people away because he's too scared of the unknown. Of the possibility of heartbreak. Someone who takes out all his anger and hatred and loneliness on the one person who's too weak to stand up to him. And crucially, someone who knows all of these things, but chooses to not be better. He's not a villain or an antagonist, or even much of a foil from what I can tell. He's not any sort of archetype as much as he likes to pretend he is. He is just a bad person, and he will never change, so much as he thinks being a bad person is the only way to protect himself.
There's nothing more to me. So please, just stop looking.
Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you liked it, tell me why. And if you didn't like it, also tell me why. I primarily make these videos to foster discussion, but if you really, really liked it, consider donating to my Patreon or buying me a coffee on Ko-fi. I'm Crab, and thank you for watching. or actually being happy and reserved. Thank you, Windows.